Hello and welcome to How to Automate Your Workflow in Excel. My name's Jeff, I'm glad you're here. Let's just jump right in. I hope you're ready to save hours each week because in this video, I'm going to show you how to automate your workflow, no coding genius required. Specifically, I'm going to show you how to use Power Query instead of manually copy pasting data into your workbooks and how to automatically summarize that data. At the end, I'm going to show you how to add a new month's worth of data with just a click. So buckle up, it's going to be a fun ride. Exercise 1. Okay, we have a folder with 3 data files. Our objective is to get the data from these files into our workbook so that we can summarize it. And the manual way to do that is to open each file, select the data range, do a copy, and paste. So I'm going to do that now, but don't worry, I'll speed it up. Alright, so we've successfully copy and pasted the data from each of the files into our report file. If you've ever done this, you know you have to be very surgical and very careful not to delete rows and to make sure you've got all the rows. Plus, next period, we have to do another copy paste. So instead of that manual way, what we can use is Power Query. So let me clear out all this data first. So with Power Query, what we would do is data, get data from file, from folder. We browse to the folder that contains the data files and click open. In the resulting dialog, we have basically a few buttons. The first one, Combine, is actually going to combine the data of all of these files into our workbook, and that's the one we want. We also have Load, which is simply going to load this list of files and not the data within the files into our workbook, and that's not what we want. We also have Transform Data, which opens this into Power Query and lets us do some additional transformations, which is beyond the scope of this video, but there are very powerful transformations that you should definitely check out. And we can, of course, cancel. So in this case, I'm going to click Combine, and we're going to combine and load to. The resulting dialog provides a preview. Assuming this looks good, we can just click OK. Also, it's important to understand that Power Query will line up the columns even if the column order is slightly different in each of these files. The main thing that has to be true is that the column labels need to be consistent. Here, we want to bring this data into a table, into an existing worksheet. We click the cell and we click OK. Now, if we needed to edit these results, we could edit these queries that are displayed in the Queries and Connections pane. In this case, we look good, so I'm just going to close that. And let's scroll down to make sure it looks like we got everything. We got February, January, and March. Now, Jeff, that didn't seem much faster than just doing a copy-paste. Maybe for the first period that's true. However, when we get to the last exercise, I'm going to show you how easy it is to add a new month and simply click refresh. So just like that, Power Query went to that folder that we defined and pulled in and merged all of the data from all of those files. So let's go to the next exercise, exercise 2. I'm going to do this exercise twice. First, I'll demonstrate a traditional manual approach, and then I'll show the automated approach. As with anything in Excel, there's many ways to accomplish this, but one manual way would be to simply use a sum function and then point it to all of the January transactions. So we would scroll down and we would select all of the January transactions, close the function, and hit enter. Now, as you can imagine, in addition to this being manual, it's also very fragile because this depends on the data not moving around. Like if we were to sort this, our totals will be wrong. Let's do another sum function for February. Close function and enter. And let's do another one for March. Close function and enter. And for the total, we can do a sum of these, close function and enter. So not only does this take some time month 1, but also it's fragile. So how would we automate this? Well, we would use a pivot table, and here's what that looks like. We head back to our data tab, we select any cell in the table, and we go to Insert Pivot Table. If you haven't used pivot tables before, the first question is where is the source data range, and it's been automatically selected. And next, we need to define where we want this pivot table report. So we're going to say we want it on an existing worksheet. We're going to browse to the worksheet, and we're going to select the cell that represents the upper left corner of this pivot table. Then we click OK. To define the structure of our pivot table report, we simply click and drag these field items into one of these 4 layout areas. Now let's take a look at this manual summary. what we can see is that within the rows, we show the months, and that the values are the total of that amount column. So we just want to replicate this. So we want date on rows, so we just simply click and drag. And for the values, we want the amount column, so we just click and drag. Now this formatting looks a little wonky, so let me just make this a little bit wider. Let me go ahead and right click and select number format. And we're going to want to go with a number, no decimals, comma, and click OK. And let me make these a little wider as well. And let's just relabel these. I'm going to call this month, and I'm going to call this total. And if you've not used PivotTables before, I would encourage you to check them out. There are a ton of design and formatting and other options, and you can investigate those using all of these PivotTable ribbon commands. Now, Jeff, that seems like it took just as long as writing these sum functions. And maybe in the first period that's true, but the benefit is next period. We won't have to do this again. We just hit refresh. And that leads us to our next exercise, exercise 3. In this exercise, we'll create a chart, and then we'll also update everything for next period. So I'll create 2 charts. One is like the manual way, and one is the automated way. So let's go to Insert, and we'll pick our chart type. Then we're going to select Data. I'm going to navigate to exercise 2, and I'm going to select this range. Then I'm going to click OK. And let's move this over here. Now that actually went pretty fast, but the problem is next period. How do we make sure that April makes it into this chart? So now we'll use a pivot chart instead of a traditional chart. So once again, we'll go back to our data source. We'll select any cell in our range, and we'll go to Insert Pivot Chart. And once again, it likes to confirm the source data range, which was automatically selected because we selected a single cell within the data range. Next, we need to tell Excel where to put the pivot chart. So we'll put it in an existing worksheet, exercise 3, and we'll put it right here. And we'll click OK. And just like before, we want to put the date here, and we want to put the actual amount here. Let me go ahead and close this. And I'm just going to click and drag and move this right here. If you've never used a pivot chart before, there are many options, so you'll want to investigate these pivot chart ribbon tabs. And while we're here, let me just go ahead and take this off by clicking delete. There we go. Jeff, setting up those automations felt like it might have taken longer than doing it manually. Well, possibly in the first period, but the benefit of setting this up is every future period. So what happens when we now want to add April? Well, under the manual approach, what it would look like is opening the April file, copy, pasting to the end of this table, manually updating our summary, and manually updating our chart. Here's what it looks like now. Now all we do is add the next file to our folder. Once that file is in the folder, we can just click Refresh All, and it's done. Now, as we can see, the contents of April are now included in our table. As we scroll down, we see April. We also see February, January, and March. Now let's go to exercise 2. Once again, we can just click Refresh All. And as we can see, our automated pivot table report automatically expands to include the April data. If we were doing this manually, what it might look like is move this down, type APR, do equals sum, cruise over here, and grab all of the April data, close function, and enter. What we're also going to notice is March is incorrect, and that's because this reference includes data that it now shouldn't. And earlier I mentioned how fragile this approach is, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. This pivot table, however, is good to go. And let's take a look at our chart. As we can see, our manual chart would need to be manually updated to include April. Our pivot chart, however, includes April automatically. And what if we didn't want January in this report? No problem, we can just take the January file out of the folder and click refresh. Or what if we wanted to add May, June, and July? We just add those files to the Power Query folder, click refresh, maybe click it again, and we're good to go. And as you can see, this is a fun way to automate our workflow. We basically used Power Query to get the data, we used a pivot table to summarize it, and we used a pivot chart. And by the way, as you can probably sense, I literally just scratched the surface of each of these features. If these are going to be helpful in your work, I would encourage you to dig deeper. They are very powerful. Hopefully this has been helpful. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Hey Excel user, if you ever need to create summary reports, check out my Pivot Table for Beginners video. It starts at the beginning and shows how to store the data transactions in a table and then how to summarize those transactions with a Pivot Table report. I hope it helps unlock the incredible power of Pivot Tables.
This video is a production of Excel University.